During a press conference, Donald Trump was asked about his ongoing talks now with the Kremlin, with representatives of Putin about Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Something that I have new reporting on for you as I continue to keep you updated on the goings on of this, obviously a hugely consequential event. And understandably, European leaders, as we've discussed, are panicking over the fact that Trump seems all too prepared to give over a lot to Putin, is acting like he almost is more favorable to Putin than Zelensky. He only will make condemning statements of Zelensky. And seems very naive about the whole thing, or just really dishonest. And so the latest example of him getting asked a question did not go well, and the implications of this are extremely scary. As always, if you appreciate these updates, please do click the subscribe button.
Do you have any message for Ukrainians who, after 3 years of fighting, might feel betrayed or disappointed at not having a seat at these initial talks in Saudi Arabia?
Well, I think I'm really...
So the question was, sometimes it's hard to hear those reporters, what do you say to Ukrainians who are disappointed about the fact that Trump is holding talks in Saudi Arabia about the fate of Ukraine and has not invited Ukraine, has not invited Zelensky or even a representative, but he wants to meet with Putin without any European voices, without any Ukrainian voices?
Disappointed in what's happened. I've been watching this for 3 years. It's a war that would have never happened if I was president. And I've been watching these people being killed at levels that you've rarely seen, not even close, since the Second World War. And I'm very disappointed. I hear that, they're upset about not having a seat. Well, they've had a seat for 3 years and a long time before that. This could have been settled very easily. Just a half-baked negotiator could have settled this.
Trump looks half-baked right now. He barely can get his eyes all the way open. What the heck? Very strange. But I will say, let me circle back to that claim of it's so easy. But first, he says Ukraine's had a seat for 3 years. What are you talking about? The really sick paradigm shift he wants people to have is over into thinking this is sort of a both sides problem. They got themselves caught up in a conflict and we don't really know what's continuing it. So both really are at fault for continuing, which again is a really sick, demented way to articulate this war, because it's a war of aggression. It's a war that started with an invasion and is only continuing because of a military invasion that seeks to take over parts of someone else's country through force and bloodshed and mass murder. And the way he talks about this would be like saying to any of the countries who were invaded by Germany during Hitler's time, saying, why won't you just give him what he wants? Sheesh. The only reason people are dying is because you won't just hand over all of the territory he wants. It's the exact same logic playing out here. And the justification, no, but Putin felt like he had to because he didn't like that Ukraine might want to be part of NATO. Very similar nonsense to what people said in going, well, he's just wanting people who... And then on to another clip.
How would you counter the perception, because Russia's pushing for this, obviously, they don't really hold true elections, that would...
And actually, before playing this, I told you I'd circle back to is even a half-baked negotiation or negotiator could have settled this long ago. Well, he said he was going to do it even before he got into office, just as the president-elect. He said he was going to do it in 24 hours. So everything he said has already been validated, because clearly he doesn't know what he's saying when he's making predictions or making proclamations like that. But it's true that if Ukraine were willing to just accept any deal that would create quote unquote peace or would pause hostilities for any period of time, any terrible negotiator, awful negotiator could get a quote unquote deal. That's true. So then why is it that Biden didn't do that if it's so easy? Well, the reason is because we don't exist in a one-day history. We don't exist in a only present and future way of thinking. We analyze the past, we analyze Putin's behavior over the last series of decades, and we see a clear intention that will violate any agreement to fulfill. And so the only lasting peace deal that wouldn't just serve as a chance for sanctions to be relieved on Russia and for them to recoup and for them to then be stronger and more destructive in a reinvasion would be very hard to craft and to get Russia to agree to. It would require security guarantees that likely are off the table for Putin. And so as Trump works with Putin now to craft something, as he thinks, oh, any negotiator could have solved this, what he means is anyone could have gotten on paper an agreement. But that means nothing if it doesn't actually induce lasting peace. And that's what the struggle is. And that's why people, as painful as it has been to watch the pain that comes of the defense of themselves, that's why so many globally have been willing to support Ukraine's defense of themselves, seeing the bigger picture, seeing the broader implications of global stability, and understanding Russia learning that they're just not going to be able to beat Ukraine and the global community into submission, and then that being the context by which the deal is crafted. That's been because there's an understanding of what we've been going over that Trump just doesn't have or just doesn't care to have.
How would you counter the perception, because Russia's pushing for this, obviously, they don't really hold true elections, that would be a capitulation of some sort? How would you guard against potentially Russia installing a puppet government? And then finally, how would that new election have an impact on getting Zelensky to sign the rare earth minerals deal?
Look, you have leadership, and I like him personally. He's fine. But I don't care about personally. I care about getting the job done. You have leadership now that's allowed a war to go on that should have never even happened, even without the United States. Look, we had a...
Even without the United States. I'm going to play more of this. Even without the United States. What does he mean? What does he mean? Ukraine, Russia, the only three actors he talks about is Ukraine, Russia, United States in this framework of his where he victim blames Ukraine. And he says that, for example, because there were talks of Ukraine joining NATO, which as a sovereign country, they should have every power to do. That just, Putin had you. Even though he's long wanted this, but okay. But he says that, and he says it's Biden who was pushing that. Well, now he's saying you take that out of the equation, and all you're saying now is that Ukraine wanting to be a sovereign country as they've been and wanting to make their own decisions means it's Zelensky's fault they were invaded. We have to call this what it is. Disgusting, deplorable, vile, sick, use whatever word you want. But there are a wide range of views as to how we approach the coming weeks, months, years of this conflict. How do we bring lasting peace? There are a lot of very smart people who disagree a lot on what the correct approach is. But what I can tell you for sure is that Trump's rhetoric about this is absolutely wrong.
Allowed a war to go on that should have never even happened, even without the United States. Look, we had a president who was grossly incompetent.
Because he doesn't know how to segue topics, it sounds like he's saying Zelensky's grossly incompetent. He's talking about Biden.
He had no idea what he was doing. He said some very stupid things, like going in for portions and all of the things. He made a lot of bad statements, but he's grossly incompetent, and I think everyone knew that. This is something that should have never happened, would have never happened. And I used to discuss it with Putin. President Putin and I would talk about Ukraine. It was the apple of his eye, I will tell you that. But there was never a chance of him going.
Yeah, so then he admits, even though there was already military conflict in Ukraine between Russian forces or Russian-backed forces and Ukrainians while Trump was president, as a part of the broader, zoomed-out goal here, even Trump admits that when he says apple of his eye, and actually saw a comment on one of my recent videos, and it was someone saying Trump's only argument, his only defense of himself and his stance is making an unprovable claim. Like, if I had been president in 2022, it never would have happened. That is a physically unprovable claim. And I've given you context to prove that it's definitely not that simple. And there's a multi-decade story being told here that's bigger than Trump. And there was military conflict already. But even so, it's interesting that his one talking point, never would have happened, 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 never would, please believe me if I say it enough times, is factually unprovable. Now, to say the full-scale invasion didn't start on Trump, okay, true. But to say when it did, after years of build-up to that moment, that would have never happened, is factually unprovable. And that's why he says it so many times. But you know what is disprovable that's connected? He used to always say it never would have happened and I'll solve it in 24 hours. So how about, just for the sake of simplicity, given that that was the full sentence during the campaign, let's just assume that those two statements are of equal validity, that he would always pair. And we've now learned that the second part, I'm going to solve it in 24 hours, is completely and totally false, because it's been much longer than 24 hours, obviously. But a reminder of one of the things Zelensky said during an interview with Meet the Press that now we have reporting of European leaders echoing.
The risk that Russia will occupy Europe is 100%.
If the United States pulls out of NATO,
Yes.
Russia will occupy Europe.
Yes, so not all the Europe. They will begin from those countries, as I said, who are big our friends, but small countries who've been in the USSR and the Soviet Union. They will begin, and we'll see what will be the answer. But Europe will not answer because they don't have. They will begin to defend itself. Each country defend itself, and at this moment. So Russia will get all the successes with all the territories they will want. I don't know, they will want 30% of Europe, 50%, I don't know, nobody knows. But they will have this possibility.
Yeah, so what he's saying there is that if the United States pulls out of NATO, which is the reason NATO has the power that it does, frankly, then Putin's ambitions, that again are so clearly established, they won't be stopped. And connected to this, the Financial Times had a report, which, by the way, if you want to support the fact that to read these stories to you on the show, I probably have like 100 subscriptions to different news outlets, because now every news outlet has a paywall. You can support the show by clicking the join button below and getting the members only bonus show. We have a lot of fun. It gets a little more casual, so I get a little gray. But please do that, because today, Financial Times, really? Another paywall? All right, put it on the company card. Oh my goodness. The implications for the rest of Europe are also alarming. Putin wants NATO troops removed from the whole of the former Soviet empire. Listen to that. Putin wants NATO troops removed from the whole of the former Soviet empire. I wonder why. European officials believe Trump is likely to agree to withdraw U.S. troops from the Baltics and perhaps further west, leaving the EU vulnerable to a Russian army that NATO governments is preparing for a larger conflict beyond Ukraine. It is clear the U.S. can no longer be regarded as a reliable ally for the Europeans, but the Trump administration's political ambitions for Europe mean that, for now, America is also an adversary, threatening democracy in Europe and even European territory in the case of Greenland. What a moment in history we're in, where our allies are saying, wait, the strongest ally we're supposed to have, are they our adversary? Do they want what's good for us, which, by the way, is good for America too? Do they want this world order maintained? Or do they want a complete geopolitical realignment? And do they care if our countries are invaded? Countries that without the power of the United States backing them will seem very appealing and very doable to Putin. And if indeed Trump agrees to withdraw U.S. troops from certain places, and if as a part of these peace negotiations, NATO forces are, if Putin gets his way and NATO forces aren't in any of the former Soviet Union states, then it's very clear where that ends. And Trump is, it seems, maybe fine with that. Maybe fine with Putin continuing his authoritarian and his power-hungry reign of terror, or his expansion, his war waging. Use the phrase you want. But Trump just may be fine with him continuing that however he'd like, as long as Trump can get a temporary win saying he brought peace to Ukraine. Even if that means the opposite of peace, much more destructively for much longer, ultimately. Share your thoughts in the comments.